This story takes place in a very small town in the northeast region of the United States. It was in the summer before I went off to college in 2015. After I graduated from high school, my parents decided to move to a smaller, more affordable house about 45 minutes north into the mountains. We stayed in my childhood home because the public schools in my area were the best in my state. My parents really valued my education. I ended up going off to an amazing university, and now I have an incredible career because of that education. As most people in the US know, however, amazing public education usually comes with higher property taxes. My parents got to the point where they could not afford the taxes on their 4,000 square foot home anymore and decided to sell it just after I graduated from high school. Their home is humble and sits on a beautiful piece of land in the side of a beautiful mountain. And the trees are always so green, and there's a lot of wildlife around. They don't really have any neighbors either, as their driveway is 1.5 miles long. That's the place they chose to live in after I went to college, though. In August of 2015, we moved into this new house. I wasn't planning on staying long, as I was getting ready to head off as a freshman for the first time. We decided to have a little housewarming party with a bunch of family friends and my best friend at the time as well. My dad was manning the barbecue, my mom was making drinks, and we were playing with our dogs. It was a grand time, and everyone was having extreme amounts of fun. My dad had built a brick fire pit in our backyard as well. Just to set the scene for you here, the fire pit was about 30 feet from our back patio door, and we had a picnic table and other seats all around. Behind the seating was the tree line. It was so dark sometimes at night, you needed a flashlight to even see 10 feet in front of you. With the fire pit lit, you couldn't see someone unless they were either sitting next to you or across from you in front of the pit. My best friend decided to stay the night, and we asked my dad if we could make some s'mores. It was getting a little chilly, as it tends to do in the late summer in the northeast at night. My parents left us outside with my dog Nino. He was a loyal, incredible dog that my dad trained as his right hand. He was our protector, as he could run extremely fast, was very strong, and alerted us whenever something went bump in the night. Nino was laying in between us facing the tree line, and my best friend was to my right. Our backs were to the dark, dense tree line, our first mistake. We were laughing, joking, and eating s'mores together, planning for our future, and generally excited about going off to college together. She decided to play some music, and we relaxed there with one another, feeling content and at ease. It was the perfect summer night, really, until Nino suddenly started growling. I saw his ears perk up and his head cocked to the side. He sat up and continued to growl. My best friend and I looked at each other, thinking Nino must have seen a stray animal or something not that threatening. This area was known for lots of deer, maybe rarely a coyote or wolf. Since he was trained to help my dad hunt, we assumed it must be a buck or a fawn in the distance behind us. We went back to singing along to the music playing and talking about our fall 2015 class schedule. Again, Nino started growling. Our second mistake, we didn't call for my dad. We didn't even think there was a problem until Nino started getting much more loud and vicious. He stood bolt upright and started barking as if alerting us to activity beyond the tree line that we could just barely not see. We stood up as well, the fire obscuring our view. My best friend took her phone, paused the music, and switched on her flashlight. She started to walk toward the edge of the tree line, with Nino by her side going crazy. He was alerting us not to go any further and to call for help. We stood still in silence, listening. I was too afraid to even breathe at this point. My friend was about to start walking into the woods. When she shined her flashlight, though, it swept across a figure, someone peering out from behind a tree. A man with a green shirt and green pants on, about 5'11". We screamed and ran as fast as we could inside, leaving the fire unattended and this creepy man stuck behind the tree. What we didn't know at the time is where this man had come from. We crashed through our front door, breathless with Nino trailing behind us. It startled my mother, obviously, who was washing dishes and cleaning up. She was talking to my dad about something they'd seen on the news. We cut him off mid-sentence to explain there was a man dressed in all green lurking behind a tree in the woods. We didn't know how long he was there or if he was still there, but we were both crying. I remember feeling extremely sick, like I was going to throw up. My dad jumped up, grabbed his shotgun and headlamp, and ran outside with Nino. My mom gathered us into the living room, shut all the lights in the house off, and locked the doors. She told us to be quiet, and she was going to call 911. As she did that, my best friend and I shook with fear. We were anticipating gunshots and screaming, but we never heard any. Now, my mom on the phone with 911 described what we saw to the operator. I heard her say "oh" in an alarming way after the dispatcher relayed some information we couldn't hear. At this point, my dad rushed back inside. My mom let him know the police were on their way. Being in a small town on a mountain with less than 10,000 people around means we don't get our own police force. We get the state police every time there's a call made to emergency responders. My dad put his gun away and waited for the police to show up. To our complete bewilderment, they didn't just send one officer like you'd expect, but 10, and an entire SWAT team. A helicopter started to circle the area as well. We were rightfully terrified. I was practically having a panic attack at this point. The officers came inside our home and asked us again what the man was wearing, what he looked like, if we were able to discern any scars or tattoos. We explained the weird matching green outfit and his glasses. The officer excused himself and alerted the SWAT members outside of our description. They started to search the woods behind our home with guns drawn and the helicopters circling above. They advised us to stay inside, and they would let us know when and if they found something. After about 25 minutes, we got another knock on our door. It was not one but two officers this time. My dad let them in, and they explained the situation. One officer explained that we must have seen on the news that a convicted felon from the prison about 20 miles away had escaped into the mountains. The police had tried to set up a perimeter 10 miles around the prison, but the convict had slipped through somehow. The outfit the man was wearing, as well as our description of him, signaled to them that this was the escaped convict that was lurking through our remote, densely wooded backyard at night. The all-green outfit was the standard issue for prisoners in my state back then. They did not, however, find the man. After 25 minutes of searching, he was still at large. The officers let us know they were going to have a squad car stay and watch our house for a few days. They were unable to locate him and believed he was still an active threat to our safety. That night, we all slept in the living room together. My dad's shotgun was within arm's reach at all times. Later that week, we got another knock on our door from the officers stationed outside. They let us know that the man was back in custody, and we now no longer had to worry. They advised us to install some security cameras and said how sorry they were this all happened to us. After that, my parents spent about $10,000 on cameras and fencing for our backyard. It's now all fenced in, and we have 4 cameras watching the tree line at all times. I guess you never know what will happen or what goes bump in the night. I currently live in an RV in my mom's driveway. My town is just slightly larger than small, and it's relatively safe. Lots of rich people, doctors, and the like live here, so it's kept very nice and crime is relatively low. I never expected something bad to happen to me because of this, but tonight I met a certain man, and he was a reminder to me to always lock my door. Sometimes I forget, even while I'm sleeping. It's never really been a big deal to me because my town is generally so safe, but I'll be remembering every time from now on. It was around 2 a.m., and I'd just taken my garbage outside to the bin. When I turned around, I noticed a figure in the dark walking toward me. I started to quickly walk away, but the man called out to me. He was a short person, probably in his 50s or 60s. I'm 23, by the way. He started to talk to me about my RV. I took charge of the conversation and shut it down very quickly. He randomly told me what house he lived in and his name as well. He was very polite, but he was giving a very off vibe. I'm sure nearly every woman knows what I mean. You know, that older man kind of creepy. Too polite to you just because you're a pretty young girl, that sort of thing. He told me I should come by his house sometime. Yeah, sure, maybe one day. Good night. I walked back to my RV and locked the door right away. I figured he'd just leave, but he didn't. I don't have a curtain on my window right now. I could hear him pacing outside my window and mumbling out loud to himself. I was hiding. I wanted to lock the door by my bed. I mean, it didn't open at all anyway, but I still wanted to lock it regardless. I got up and looked outside, only to see the man staring right in at me. He was waving at me to get my attention, walking right up to my window and acting completely erratic, so different from the way he'd just been acting. I locked the door and he watched me. After that, he left my window. I could feel he was still there though. 5 or so minutes passed by, and now he was knocking at the RV door. I waited there for about an hour before I grabbed a knife and took the chance to sprint to my mom's house. I'm definitely getting a taser or a gun after this. He'd been standing across the street, waiting for me. There's no reason for him to have been just outside my RV that long at 2 a.m. I think he'd been watching me for a while too. People shouldn't really know that I lived in that RV. Walking down the street, it's not something you'd initially note. I've only ever started to pay attention to the RVs and driveways since I started living in one, and still I don't notice if people are actually in them or not. I don't know, maybe I'm being naive, but it makes me wonder how long he's been watching me, seeing as how he knew immediately I lived in the RV that day. I don't really ever leave it much except for necessities since I'm a complete homebody, so he'd have actually had to been watching for a long time to notice someone living in it. It terrifies me. I was afraid of his intentions. He made me realize that even though I live in a safe town, I'm still a young woman, and I'm a target on many men's lists. It sucks that that's the way it is, and it sucks there are people out there who are like this towards other people. This happened to us 2 years ago. We, myself, my daughter, and her father, lived in a shared house. This incident took place over the span of an entire month. So one day, we decided to walk to the store, as it was close by to the house and it was quite a nice day out. When we came back though, we noticed someone had tried to pry the locks off our door while we were gone. There were obvious dents and huge blue marks. There was a big boot print on our door as well, both the front and back doors. Someone wanted in real bad. I had no idea why though. We had nothing of major value and lived out in the hood. We had been gone for less than 20 minutes, so of course we were on edge. The person could very well still be around. We heard no sign of them for the rest of that day, but after that, so many bizarre things started to happen. I'm trying my best to explain this in a way that's easy to follow and to keep it short as well. If I listed out each and everything that happened that I'd noticed in my house, I'd be typing for many days. The most common thing was that I'd find things out of place where I know I didn't put them there. I'd noticed the locks on my old-ass windows were suddenly broken, or that my dish liquid bottle was broken as well. There was always this weird oily substance on random shit as well. On the curling iron in the bathroom, even on some of my daughter's toys. Later on, I went to take the trash out to the dumpster in the alley. When I lifted up the lid, I saw some type of homemade tool inside. It was a short metal rod with a washcloth tied around the end and a blue doctor's type glove on the other end. I realized this is what the person had been using on my door to try and pry open the lock. That's where the blue markings had come from. Well, holy shit. What else was out here in the trash? I took a look in my neighbor's dumpster as well, just because I had a bit of a suspicion. What I found made my heart sink. In their trash bag were several of my belongings, the most random stuff too. The title to my old car, which had been in a duffel bag in the top of my closet, some of my clothes, some makeup, random household items. At this time, the woman who lived next door saw me discovering this. She and the man who lived there with her started to yell at me quite loudly. She walked out and across the street. The man was just standing in the doorway giving me a death look. I was pissed and scared, coming to the realization that these people had been in my house several times. I looked up at them. "I know you guys have been in my house, you motherfuckers!" The immediate response? "Well, I didn't steal anything," with a smirk. Quick description of the man, a shirtless, fat, redneck old white guy. I was fucking losing it. The words slipped right out of my mouth. "If you do that again, I'm gonna burn your fucking house down." My mind was racing, thinking of all the times I discovered things out of place. My dish liquid bottle that was broken, well, it sat on the sink just below the window. They must have broken it through coming in. They'd been in my house multiple times. Cut to the chase. I called the cops, they came out, talked to the neighbors, and left right away. After they left, the man was out by my back door on the phone with someone with a big grin. Not 10 minutes later, 5 cars pulled up full of people. A big truck pulled up behind mine and blocked it in. A white guy with a tank top on and gold chains around his neck hopped out. He had a gun. I shoved a chair up against my back door and saw these people heading right for it. I screamed for my boyfriend, grabbed my daughter, and ran as fast as I could out the front door. At this time, there were people coming around the side of the house as well. I could hear them start shooting. I was almost off the porch. All I could do was scream for mercy and yell, "Please, no." We were running down the street as I was holding my daughter. Because I was running with her, she had no idea what was going on. I could just feel I was about to get shot in the back. I knew I was going to get gunned down in the street. Somehow, though, we made it around the corner and didn't die. Called the cops again, they searched and found no bullets. Took statements from the neighbors. I asked them to stay for a moment while I went into the house to grab some clothes, as we sure as shit weren't going to stay there tonight. When I went to grab the clothes and diapers, I saw an empty gallon of weed killer in my daughter's room. What the fuck? That must have been the oily substance I'd been coming across. In the time it took us to run, wait on the cops, and come back, they had re-entered my house again and poured weed killer all over my clothes, my daughter's clothes, and all her diapers. I gathered up what I could and left. Nothing ever came of it, of course. No arrests, and the last time I went back was to get the rest of my belongings and never come back again. There will be no answers to all my questions, and I still have nightmares about it. I'll never get closure either. My boyfriend showed me this sub a while back, and after lurking for a hot second, I realized I had my own story to tell. The summer of my junior year in high school, I'd been romantically involved with a guy. We'd gotten to the point in our relationship where he was ready for me to meet his friends. We decided it would be cool if we all went to the state fair that was in town for the next few days. With a little bit of planning and corralling, we all hopped into my boyfriend's little Taurus and headed for the city. Keep in mind, we're all a bunch of dumb, edgy teenagers, so a pre-game hot box was a must for any event. With the exception of my boyfriend who was driving, we were all pretty damn high. At one point, one of the girls in the car suggested we pull over and get some snacks from the gas station coming up. For whatever reason, I was the one who managed to get stuck with the job of running in and grabbing what everyone wanted. I was annoyed, but pretty desperate for his friends to think I was cool. I jotted down everyone's requests on my phone and headed inside. I walked up and down a few aisles for a bit, trying to find what I could from the list. Around the end of my little shopping spree, I picked up a bag of chocolate-dipped pretzels and turned to head to checkout. That was when an older man in the row behind me called out and asked me to toss him a bag. I, of course, thought nothing of this and figured I'd save him the trip and be nice. I threw one over to him. I took my snacks to the counter, and that was when I noticed the man was now following me. He asked me a few questions, like my name and where I was headed with all that food. I don't know if it was because I was blitzed or just stupid, but I happily answered all his questions, even telling him my real name and that I was headed to the fair with some friends. He smiled and told me my name was the same as his daughter's name. He seemed polite enough, maybe a bit too chatty and bad with social cues, but otherwise harmless. It was then that he offered to pay for my things, telling me I should save my money for the fare. I shook my head and insisted it was fine, but thanked him for the offer. He slapped his hand hard on my shoulder. It lingered for a bit too long. He whispered and told me not to move, and he'd get his wallet from his truck. I started to feel a bit uneasy then. I exchanged glances with the woman at the counter, and I could tell the weird feeling was mutual. I tried to use him going to his car as a chance to fish out my money, pay for my shit, and get the fuck out of there. I grabbed my receipt and started sprinting towards the car when the man made a beeline right for me in the parking lot. He wagged his finger and scolded me for leaving without waiting. I uncomfortably laughed it off and told him I should be getting back to my friends. They'd been waiting for a long time. It was then that he steered the conversation away from the snacks and asked me if I wanted to see some pictures of his daughter. He told me he kept them in his glove box, and if I wanted to see them, it would only take a second. Finally, alarms were going off in my stupid head. I declined him and told him I really needed to go right now. He reached a hand out and grabbed me by the arm towards him, repeating over and over again that it would only be a couple of minutes. I panicked and started screaming, trying to yank my arm away. That was just enough of a reaction to start turning heads in the parking lot. The man let go of me and rushed back to his car. Hyperventilating and clutching my bag of snacks, I sprinted to the Taurus, where I was bombarded with questions from my boyfriend and his friends. Apparently, everyone had thought I knew the man up until I started screaming. They intended to come out and help once they realized what was going on, but the interaction had just ended that fast that they were unable to do anything. For a few hours, I considered reporting the incident to someone, but I figured I didn't have enough info or reasoning to justify it. I still can't help but think what would have happened in that parking lot had it been a little emptier, or if I'd come alone.